Could the most formidable armored division on the Western Front, having cornered its prey, suddenly find itself outmaneuvered not by superior numbers, but by sheer, audacious will? Imagine the freezing Ardennes forest in late December 1944. The air, thick with the smell of pine and gunpowder, offered no solace against the biting cold that turned every breath into an icy plume. Inside the besieged Belgian town of Bastogne, the crunch of snow underfoot was often punctuated by the whistle of incoming German artillery, a constant reminder of their isolation. American paratroopers, the valiant 101st Airborne Division, dug into the frozen earth, uniforms thin, ammunition dwindling, their hopes flickering against the relentless pressure. By December 22, 1944, the 1st SS Panzer Division, Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, Hitler's elite armored fist, had completed a tightening noose around Bastogne. They had them cornered. Yet it was in this seemingly insurmountable predicament that General George S. Patton, Jr. saw not an ending, but an unprecedented opportunity. In the next 18 minutes, you'll witness exactly how this seemingly impossible pivot unfolded, how one man's audacious gamble changed the course of the Battle of the Bulge, and why his legend, Old Blood and Guts, still resonates today. The German offensive, launched on December 16, 1944, was a desperate, audacious gamble orchestrated by Adolf Hitler himself. Codenamed Wacht am Rhein, Watch on the Rhine, its objective was nothing less than to split the Allied lines, seize the vital port of Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace. 3 German armies, totaling over 250,000 men and nearly 1,000 tanks, smashed through the thinly held American lines in the Ardennes, catching the Allies completely by surprise. The sheer scale and ferocity of the assault overwhelmed forward positions, creating a massive bulge in the Allied front, giving the battle its enduring name. The 1st SS Panzer Division, a spearhead of this colossal thrust, embodied the ruthless efficiency and fanatical determination of the German war machine. Their advance was swift, brutal, and seemingly unstoppable, designed to instill terror and break resistance. They were a force forged in fire, trained for aggressive breakthroughs, and now they were driving deep into Allied territory. As the German juggernaut rolled west, chaos erupted across the Allied command. Divisions were shattered, communications severed, and a pervasive fog of war descended. The strategic importance of Bastogne, a crossroads town with 7 major roads converging, became immediately apparent. If the Germans controlled Bastogne, their advance could continue unimpeded. The task of holding this critical junction fell to the 101st Airborne, rushed into the sector with minimal preparation. Their defense was heroic, but increasingly desperate. Surrounded, outnumbered, and battered by constant shelling, they faced an impossible choice: surrender or perish. General Anthony McAuliffe famously responded, "Nuts," to the German surrender demand on December 22nd, a defiant gesture, but one that belied the truly dire situation on the ground. Temperatures plummeted, often below 0 degrees Fahrenheit, causing frostbite and turning every wound into a grave threat. Supplies were scarce, and the prospect of relief seemed a distant dream. Meanwhile, General George S. Patton, Jr.'s Third Army was engaged in heavy fighting hundreds of miles to the south, pushing into the Saar region of Germany. His troops were committed, his supply lines stretched, and his focus was fixed on his own offensive. Yet, even as the scale of the Ardennes crisis became clear, Patton was already thinking. While others saw catastrophe, he saw a unique, albeit terrifying, opportunity. The very strength of the 1st SS Panzer Division, their relentless push, had created a salient that, paradoxically, became vulnerable to a commander willing to exploit it with unprecedented speed. But how could an entire army pivot 90 degrees in the middle of a brutal winter to relieve a town already deemed lost? If you were in that war room, facing those odds, what would have been your first move? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The conventional wisdom said it couldn't be done. Not in days, perhaps not even in weeks. The logistics alone were a nightmare. Thousands of vehicles, tens of thousands of men, all needing to turn, re-equip, and march through snow-choked roads directly into the teeth of the German advance. The question wasn't just if it was possible, but how such a move could be executed before Bastogne fell. To conventional military minds, the very notion of such a pivot was madness. General Omar Bradley, commanding the 12th Army Group, and even Supreme Allied Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower initially viewed Patton's proposal with a mix of disbelief and alarm. Their armies were stretched, their resources committed to a grinding offensive along the German border. To disengage 3 divisions, the 4th Armored, 26th, and 80th Infantry Divisions, from their current front, reorient them 90 degrees north, and launch a counteroffensive through hostile territory was an undertaking of staggering complexity. It wasn't merely a matter of issuing orders. It required a complete reversal of supply lines, a retasking of air support, and a psychological shift for tens of thousands of combat-weary soldiers. The Third Army was then fighting in the Saar, facing formidable German defenses, and pulling them out meant abandoning hard-won ground, exposing flanks, and risking a collapse in another sector. Yet Patton, a man who famously declared, "A good plan, violently executed now, is better than a perfect plan next week," was undeterred. On December 19, 1944, at a crucial meeting of Allied generals in Verdun, France, he made his case. While others debated defensive strategies and the potential for further German advances, Patton cut through the fog of war with characteristic bluntness, proclaiming his Third Army could attack within 48 hours. This wasn't bravado. It was a calculated assertion from a commander who understood not just the mechanics of warfare, but the psychology of his men and his opponents. He had already issued preliminary orders, a testament to his foresight and his absolute confidence in his troops. The logistical challenge was immense, moving approximately 133,000 men, 20,000 vehicles, and thousands of tons of supplies over hundreds of miles of icy, congested roads, all while maintaining strict radio silence to preserve the element of surprise. The sheer audacity of this plan, the almost reckless strategic daring, was pure Patton. His staff worked around the clock, mapping new routes, coordinating fuel dumps, and securing ammunition. The roads, already choked with refugees and retreating units, had to be cleared and secured. Engineers worked tirelessly to repair bridges and clear obstacles, often under sporadic German fire. The weather, which had initially aided the German surprise, now threatened to cripple any Allied countermove. Blizzards swept through the Ardennes, coating everything in a thick blanket of snow and ice, grounding vital air reconnaissance and close air support. Every mile gained was a testament to brutal physical labor and unwavering resolve. This was a battle against the elements as much as against the enemy. Patton's genius lay in recognizing that the very success of the 1st SS Panzer Division, their relentless push, had created a strategic vulnerability. By driving so deep, by extending their flanks, the German salient had become a massive, exposed target, a paradox of strength turning into weakness. The enemy had stretched their supply lines to the breaking point, their advanced units outrunning their infantry support and their fuel. This was the moment for a commander willing to exploit it with unprecedented speed, to pivot from defense to offense in a matter of days, not weeks. The German High Command, confident in their momentum and the impossible conditions, never anticipated such a rapid, decisive shift. They believed the Allies were reeling, incapable of a coordinated response of this magnitude. This belief, this underestimation, was the crack in their armor that Patton intended to shatter. He gambled that the speed of his attack would overwhelm the Germans before they could consolidate their gains or redeploy their formidable panzer divisions. The Third Army's objective was not just to relieve Bastogne. It was to plunge a dagger into the German flank, to cut off their spearheads, and to shatter their offensive momentum. This wasn't just a battle for territory. It was a battle of wills, a clash between German tactical brilliance and Patton's almost reckless strategic daring. Guards this detail for a second, because it redefines everything that comes next. The stakes were unimaginable, but for Patton, the choice was clear. Risk everything or lose everything. The fate of Bastogne, and perhaps the entire Western Front, hinged on this impossible pivot. The fate of Bastogne, and perhaps the entire Western Front, hinged on this impossible pivot. The genius of Patton's move wasn't just in the audacity of the idea, but in its execution, a logistical and psychological feat that defied every military textbook. Imagine trying to turn a massive, deeply engaged army, a force of nearly 133,000 men and 20,000 vehicles, a full 90 degrees, then thrust it through a blizzard-ridden landscape directly into the enemy's most dangerous flank. This wasn't a subtle adjustment. It was a strategic hammer blow, delivered with the speed of a coiled spring releasing. Patton's staff, working under his relentless pressure, orchestrated a maneuver that was less about planning and more about sheer, brutal will. Within 72 hours of the Verdun meeting on December 19th, his Third Army began its pivot. 3 divisions, the 4th Armored, 26th, and 80th Infantry Divisions, were pulled from their defensive positions on the Saar front. Their gear restowed, their orders changed, and their direction reversed. This wasn't a parade. It was a forced march through an unforgiving winter. Roads that were already treacherous with ice and snow had to be cleared by engineers, often working under the constant threat of German reconnaissance or stray artillery. Military police formed a human chain, directing the endless convoys of tanks, trucks, and half-tracks, ensuring that the critical flow of men and material continued without pause. The roar of thousands of engines, the grinding of treads on frozen earth, became the soundtrack of an army moving faster than any had thought possible. The German High Command, particularly Field Marshal Walter Model and General Hasso von Manteuffel, were convinced that any significant Allied counteroffensive would take weeks to mount, giving them ample time to consolidate their gains. They believed the weather, the Allied disarray, and the sheer scale of their own advance had bought them precious time. This underestimation was their fatal flaw. They had pushed so deep, so fast, that their spearhead, the 1st SS Panzer Division, was now operating at the extreme limit of its supply lines, its flanks dangerously exposed. It was like a boxer who overextends a punch, leaving his midsection wide open for a counter. Patton's Third Army was that counter, aiming directly for the exposed ribs of the German offensive. The very strength of the 1st SS Panzer Division, their relentless push, had created a salient that paradoxically became vulnerable to a commander willing to exploit it with unprecedented speed. Patton didn't just understand tactics, he understood the psychology of momentum. He knew that if he could hit the Germans hard and fast before they could react, he could not only relieve Bastogne, but shatter the entire offensive. On December 22nd, 1944, just 3 days after Patton's audacious promise, the first elements of the Third Army launched their attack north. This rapid advance of the Third Army did more than just break the encirclement of Bastogne. It shattered the German offensive's momentum, demoralized their forces, and injected a desperate urgency into the Allied counteroffensive. The sheer velocity of this pivot, from a static defensive posture to a full-blown offensive thrust, in less than 72 hours remains a monumental achievement in military history. It wasn't just about moving men and machines. It was about instilling a fierce, almost fanatical drive in every soldier, from the lowest private to the divisional commanders. Patton's presence, his fiery speeches, his almost mythic reputation permeated the ranks. He demanded the impossible, and his men, exhausted and freezing, delivered. They knew what was at stake. They knew the 101st Airborne was trapped, and they knew their general expected nothing less than total, immediate commitment. This was the moment where Old Blood and Guts wasn't just a nickname. It was a force multiplier, a testament to a leader who could bend an entire army to his will. The crucial turning point wasn't just the relief of Bastogne, but the demonstration that a commander's audacious improvisation and sheer will could fundamentally alter the course of a campaign, overriding material limitations and established doctrines. The German advance, initially a brilliant stroke, had overextended itself, creating a weakness that only a commander like Patton had the vision and the courage to exploit. The Third Army's lead elements, specifically the 4th Armored Division, reached the perimeter of Bastogne on December 26, 1944, just 4 days after the attack began, punching a corridor through the German lines. This was a direct, undeniable blow to the heart of the German offensive, catching them completely off guard. The speed of this relief effort, covering nearly 100 miles of hostile, snow-covered terrain in such a short time frame, was an unquantifiable shock to the German system, disrupting their entire timetable and throwing their carefully laid plans into chaos. The link-up at Bastogne on December 26, 1944, was more than just a military success. It was a profound psychological victory. When the lead elements of the 4th Armored Division finally broke through, connecting with the beleaguered 101st Airborne, the relief was palpable. Exhausted, frost-bitten paratroopers who had held out against impossible odds saw not just tanks and men, but a tangible manifestation of a promise kept. The German High Command, particularly Field Marshal Model, was left stunned. Their audacious offensive, designed to shatter Allied morale and split their forces, had instead been met with an equally audacious and far swifter counterpunch. The 1st SS Panzer Division, once the relentless spearhead, now found its momentum broken, its flanks threatened, and its strategic goals slipping away. This seemingly impossible pivot, executed with a speed and precision that astonished both allies and enemies, wasn't just about relieving Bastogne. It was a profound demonstration that the human element of leadership, characterized by sheer will, aggressive decision-making, and an almost intuitive understanding of battlefield dynamics, could fundamentally alter the course of a campaign, overriding material limitations and established doctrines. The very strength of the 1st SS Panzer Division, their relentless push, had created a salient that paradoxically became vulnerable to a commander willing to exploit it with unprecedented speed. This wasn't just a battle for territory. It was a battle of wills, a clash between German tactical brilliance and Patton's almost reckless strategic daring. The rapid advance of the Third Army did more than just break the encirclement of Bastogne. It shattered the German offensive's momentum, demoralized their forces, and injected a desperate urgency into the Allied counteroffensive, ultimately shortening the war. The legacy of this moment extends far beyond the snow-covered forests of the Ardennes. It enshrined Patton as Old Blood and Guts, a commander who demanded the impossible and often achieved it, influencing military doctrine on rapid maneuver and aggressive leadership for generations. His actions raised critical questions about the balance between meticulous planning and audacious improvisation in warfare. Was this a stroke of genius, a calculated gamble that simply paid off, or a testament to the unyielding resilience of the GIs who executed his vision in the face of brutal conditions? The answer lies in the fusion of all three: a commander's foresight, a willingness to risk everything, and an army capable of Herculean effort. Patton's strategic miracle at the Bulge proved that while logistics and intelligence are crucial, the decisive factor can often be the sheer force of a leader's personality and the fighting spirit he inspires. It taught a generation of military strategists that speed and surprise, even against overwhelming odds, can be the ultimate equalizer. The image of the 1st SS Panzer Division cornering Bastogne, only to be outmaneuvered by a seemingly impossible pivot, serves as a timeless reminder that even in the darkest moments, leadership, courage, and an unshakable will can change the fate of empires. The battlefield is not just about firepower, it's about the human will to overcome. If this deep dive into Patton's audacious move and its lasting impact made sense to you, subscribe now to Warriors of the Homeland so you don't miss the next chapter in military history. Leave a like to let me know this path of deep analysis is worth continuing, and comment below what part of Patton's strategy or leadership truly turned the key for you. I'll be reading your insights and bringing those ideas into our next video.